listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, your guide to living an authentic, healthy life. A podcast about living with more joy, grace, and zip. Being more in your true, authentic self, having more energy and feeling good physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We also strive to be entertaining as well as educational. We'll be interviewing experts in the field of health and well-being, sharing with you our knowledge and experience to help you eat better, feel better, do better, and have a more positive outlook on life. Sounded good to be true? Maybe possible? Well then, you're in the right place.
Dr. Diana Draper, ND, is a graduate of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. As a licensed primary care provider, Dr. Draper uses natural therapies that work with the body's innate healing abilities to promote optimal, sustainable health by addressing all areas of the self. Today, Diana and I are going to chat about adrenal fatigue and the ramifications for your health and well-being. Diana, how are you today?
I'm good, Janine. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. I'm very excited to have a conversation with you today because, let's see, it's probably been maybe 3 or 4 months that we've been trying to make this happen.
Yes, this is very true.
Life has been getting in the way of our conversation.
A little bit. It has that tendency, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we had talked about is talking about adrenal fatigue and the ramifications of that. But I thought first, I really like to get a sense of, and I think it's really nice for the listeners to get a sense of your journey of how you chose to become a naturopath, what it took for you to become a naturopath, the pitfalls, what you might do differently, that kind of thing. And then we'll get into the topic of adrenal fatigue.
Okay, that sounds good.
So take it away.
How did I get into becoming a naturopath? Is that the first question we've got?
Yes. When we were chatting, one of the things that I'd love for you to share is your story about when you were 8 years old, because that kind of sounded to me like the beginning of maybe the seed being planted for you of when you had mono.
Yes. Okay. Well, so my father was a dentist and my mother became a herbalist when I was in high school. So I grew up in a realm of medicine, conventional medicine, naturopathic, alternative medicine. That was sort of our home theme. And when I was 8, I got mono and I was very, very serious about my dancing at that time. And so we had a dance competition, it was a dance show in about a week that we were doing when I was diagnosed with mono. So this was the most devastating thing humanly possible for me at the time. And so my dad he was in charge of the Cooney Dental Society's conferences. And the last conference that he'd run, they had a homeopath there. And so Dad said, because our family doctor said, there's nothing we can do. Just go home and sleep and rest and, give time basically. And that was also devastating because I had a dance show in a week and I was sleeping about 12 hours a day at that time. So Dad called the homeopath. He was out on the island. And so him and I had a phone conversation. It was about an hour and a half that we chatted. And then he sent me a remedy and it was a liquid. I wish I remember what it was, but I can't remember. But I started taking it and within a couple days, I was better. The mono was gone and I was able to get to my dance show and perform. And so it was just this overwhelmingly eye-opening experience where, him and I didn't talk about my symptoms very much. We talked about who I was, how clean I kept my room, what were my food cravings, where were my stresses in life right now, and all of these things. So it was very, for an hour and a half, it was therapeutic in itself because I had someone who really wanted to know everything about me, right? And there's 4 kids in our family and I'm the youngest. So having an hour and a half of an adult who's really interested in me was, that in itself was amazing, right? So I just found it fascinating, and the capacity to give someone something that helps their body heal. It was quite amazing. So that was the first time I think I got exposed to the power of natural medicine and the power of looking at the body from that perspective, not just about your symptoms and how you're feeling, but who you are. How do you manage in the world? How do you perceive things, and how that can affect how I'm doing? How clean my room is, I would have never thought was a determinant of my overall health, right? But it was part of the picture of who I am and how I manage things. So, now looking back, I understand why he was asking those questions at the time. I was just, happy to share. So that was how it started for me. And then when I did my undergrad, I was in Victoria. I chose to do English and professional writing because I love to read, and I had tried the sciences, and it made no sense to me to do double the work for the same amount of credit because you'd always have to do a lab component. I just thought that was ridiculous. So I did English and professional writing. And in my 3rd summer, so between my 3rd and 4th year, I was at home being a server for the summer. And every morning I'd wake up and Mom and I would go down to the herbal garden that she grew. And, I'd say, oh, I'm feeling like this today. And we pick herbs based on my mood. And then we'd make tea for that. And then in the evening, I'd come home from serving and we'd talk about something and we'd pull out the flower essences and we'd play with those. And again, I was more passionate about doing that summer than I was about what I was reading in school and writing this essay about whoever. Like it sparked my passion about how much, how I'm feeling, where I'm at, what I'm thinking about. There's medicine for that, to help that or to strengthen it. So, and medicine that grew in the backyard, right? Like we just walked to the backyard and picked it out. So that sparked a passion in me to figure that out. And then I finished school and I went backpacking for a year and a half. And then I came back from that and applied to naturopathic medical school on a total whim of, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah. It's a lesson here for everyone because you and I have similar stories because my first degree was in theater and dance. And that was mainly to avoid the sciences. And then I went to nursing school and had to do them all anyway. So my advice to those of you listening, if you have any thought that you want to do something difficult or you're avoiding something difficult, you may as well just go for it because you're probably going to end up doing what your passion is anyway.
Totally. I wish someone had said to me that because I would have gone and got my first degree in dance. But when I was looking at it, I was like, no, what if I break my leg? What am I going to have to, fall back on? Blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, I did an arts degree and then ended up in medicine. So, my gosh, you just end up there anyway. So go do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Figure out what your passion is and just go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were saying to me also when we were talking earlier that you didn't realize how difficult it was going to be and what it was going to take to become a naturopath. So what did you draw on from your inner resources? How did you get through it? How'd you manage? Because I know in nursing school, there were plenty of times I was ready to quit. And I stuck through it because I had a support person who kind of forced me to stick through it and get through and finish. What did you do? How did you get through it?
Sheer survival and stubbornness, Janine, really. There was a few things that happened when I first got to school and realized what I'd gotten myself into. Growing up, we'd play with herbs and talk about feelings and do all of that, right? So I really thought I was going to go to school and we were going to learn about herbal medicine and talk about feelings and learn how to help people that way. I had no idea I was going to a medical program. And day one, when you're in cadaver lab cutting open dead bodies, I just kind of was looking around going, what? what is happening? I had no idea, none whatsoever. So I think in the first week, I called my really good friends back home and said, I want to come home. I was in tears, like, I want to come home. I don't know what I signed up for. I'm not ready for this. And they were like, no, you don't get to do that. You're staying. So that was the first part. And then I linked up with some really good people. My two roommates that I lived with, all of us felt very similar about, one of them was a nurse. And so she had gone to medical school, and all of us had a lot of challenges around this idea of being primary care providers, dealing with cancer, all of those serious things that after 4 years, you become very comfortable with in training. But on the initial day, when you're thinking, I'm just going to this alternative medicine program that's going to give people another option to their healthcare, you don't realize that, no, you're becoming a doctor and you have a license and you are accountable towards, I'm accountable towards two different governing bodies and then another association. So a lot, right? There's a lot there.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, which I had no idea about. And still, and kind of then you get into the swing of school and you put your head down and you get her done, because that's it. And so I have a bit of dyslexia. I have a hard time reading and pronouncing words. And so I found a study group, and there was 4 of us that we studied together every exam period out loud. And that was how I survived that piece of it. And otherwise, it's kind of a whirlwind. Like you're focused on one goal, whether it's to get through that exam or to get through that year or to make it to the next step, and you just get it done. So I don't even think it was really until 4th year that I started to come out of that and realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm almost done now. And now I have to think about the rest of my life and what I'm going to do with it. So it was ignorance, sheer ignorance kind of I was doing. Slow every little bit, accepting every little step of the way, learning a little bit more, but sheer ignorance. And I had a great support. I had a sister who is a lawyer, and so she had gone through professional schooling, and a father who was a dentist, and so he had gone through professional schooling, and so they were really great in the human capacity of being very realistic about, like, no, they have to cut you down. They're molding you into a different person who looks at the world differently and who thinks differently. And so you feeling like you're completely lost is actually just, you're right on target of what you're going through right now. And that's what they have to do. And, when I would call my mom crying because I'm so exhausted and we've got 3 more exams and how can I possibly study? And she's like, well, if you were in the ER for 12 hours straight or 24 hours straight, they got to know that you're still going to be able to think straight. So that's what's happening. So I had some very practical people in my life that gave me perspective at those moments when you couldn't do that for yourself.
Mm-hmm. While you were talking, I had the thought, I think it would be really nice if you could explain from your perspective what the differences are between a naturopath and an MD. Because I don't think a lot of people really know, when is it appropriate to go to a naturopath? How do you think differently? How do you practice differently?
That's a really tough one, because I think every practitioner has their own way of approaching things. So I have met quite a few family doctors, medical doctors, who do a lot of the same things that I do. And then I've met a lot who do things very differently than me, and naturopaths who practice very, very conventional medicine, Western medicine, and other ones that, steer clear and stick very, very much so to the alternative. So that's a tough one in the way of, what the difference. I try to explain to people, we're all primary care providers. I never went to, conventional medical school. So training wise, as far as I've experienced with working side by side with family doctors, we're trained very similarly. We speak the same language. We understand each other. We chart the same, there's a lot of similarities there because we can work and pass through patients very easily on the same page. So understanding the human body and how it works and signs of illness and what to watch out for and how to navigate through finding out what that is, are all very similar. Where I think the biggest difference is my specialty is natural medicine. And their specialty is, well, I don't even want to say that because I'm not sure, but they know more about pharmaceuticals, I would say. That being said, I've met family doctors that know quite a bit about natural medicine, and I've met naturopaths that know a lot about pharmaceuticals. We in BC, we have prescribing rights. So that is part of our disciplinary, is to understand that and know how to do that. So, that's a tough one. Why people will come to a naturopath, in my opinion, people will come all realms, because I think we need everybody at a different time, or we need a lot of people all at one time. So, if you break your arm, you're going to need a cast, and I can't do that for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you need your family doc or your Western medicine to do that. But at the same time, I have a lot of natural therapies that can help manage the pain and help your bone heal very, very well, without stressing out your liver or your kidney or things like that. So that's a very simple way of an analogy. I have a family doctor that I use at certain times when, I need certain things done that naturopaths can't do. And then I have a naturopathic doctor that I spend a lot of time with that helps me out with other things. So basically what happens when you see a naturopath, or at least when you see me, is we spend a lot of time digging into who you are and what's going on in your life and how you got to where you are at that moment and figuring that piece out. So it's not just about your symptoms. We do a lot to help manage your symptoms so you're not suffering if that's the case, but we do a lot of what I call backdoor work. So working on overall lifestyle stuff. So when the symptoms are gone, we've created habits, mentalities, lifestyle behaviors to keep you healthy, so you don't end up back there again. I think that's one of the biggest differences when you see a naturopath. At least when you see me, we spend, between 45 minutes to an hour and a half together in appointments to go through all of that, because you just need that time to get to know someone. So create quite a intimate relationship with them, and you start to really get to understand them, and they start to get to understand you and how you work. And I think that's the biggest difference. I have worked in a medical doctor's office alongside them, and time is a big piece of that. Having the time to dig in and get that done is, I think that would probably be the biggest one.
So it sounds like and I know some allopathic physicians do this too, but especially functional medicine doctors. But your focus is in taking the time to really, really get to understand the whole person, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that you're really able to work on all realms with that person.
Yes. Yeah. I'm nodding, but yes. Yeah. I have yet to have someone have something going on, and not have there be an emotional piece and a mental piece and, a spiritual piece, if you want to go there. I think the human body is very, very smart at being healthy, and it's the human brain that has the capacity to really throw us off our tracks sometimes. And there's always, loopholes or exceptions to the rule in that case, right? And we've seen that diabetes is one of them, right? You're born with not enough beta cells. I mean, that's just what it is. But for the most part, I see the human body being, very smart at knowing how to be healthy and really wanting to be healthy and trying to keep us healthy. And, it's us that step in the way and get in the way of that, right? Whether that's our lifestyle choices or our thought processes or a little bit of both, or, our experiences and how we choose to engage in the world. So the human body is quite simple in its functioning, once you understand it. It's the human being that can make things quite complicated. And I say that with a lot of compassion because I'm definitely one of them.
Well, we all are. I mean, it's a big spectrum. It's a wide spectrum. And I think we all are, to one extent or another, our own worst enemy.
Right. Absolutely. I will fully admit I am a challenging patient.
Okay. Wow. So, You had suggested that we talk about adrenal fatigue, and maybe let's start with why you felt that was important and a subject that you wanted to share with people.
Well, I think adrenal fatigue is important because we're seeing it. I'm seeing it more and more now. And I don't know if I'm seeing it more and more now because it's starting to become something that's recognized and it's always been around. That's always a question with medicine, right? As we get more educated, have these things been around forever and we're just catching them now? Or are they actually something that's becoming more and more epidemic in our world? But adrenal fatigue for me is quite common. I see that quite often in my office. And I usually see it when people are very, very far into the process of adrenal fatigue. And that's one of the ones that, it's quite rewarding to help people get through, because when you don't feel good, you don't feel good. And when you start to feel good, it really does change your life around. And it's quite wonderful to watch, to be part of, right? But the challenge is it's also one of those conditions that doesn't change overnight. And I mean, we didn't get overnight, so it doesn't change overnight, but a lot of people we're very impatient when we don't feel good. And so, when you have adrenal fatigue and you're tired and it takes you everything to get out of bed in the morning and you're trying to show up for life, it gets very, very frustrating. And so, and I have very few people that I see in my office that don't have some level of adrenal fatigue, insufficiency challenges going on, because we live in a very fast-paced, high-demand society where, us as people become very low on the totem pole of priorities a lot of the time. And that's just part of society, right? So when you are waking up and you're doing everything throughout your day to take care of everybody else, and then at the end of the day, when you don't have anything left, that's your time that's supposed to be taking care of you. You can see very quickly how we end up in a position where we're the ones depleted. And the challenge is, if we're the ones depleted, the rest of the ship goes down if we're in charge of running it, right? So
that's true.
So, it's, for me, it's really, I don't know, it's one of the areas that I really enjoy working with and seeing patients with. I mean, I like it all, but it's also very close to the heart, because when you work with people with adrenal fatigue, you get to know who they are and what motivates them and what they're passionate about and how their thought process work. And, you really get to know how they operate. And I find people fascinating. I think human beings, we're just fascinating creatures, because I can be standing there looking at the exact same thing that you are, and we're seeing it completely differently. Completely. And so
absolutely.
I find that really fascinating. And so with adrenal fatigue, a lot of that comes from the way that we perceive our lives and how we interact in the world. And so when you start to work with someone about that, and you start to be able to create a new reality for them, it's really empowering. And it's really empowering to watch them become empowered, right? Because it's like, oh, right, I don't have to live my life this way. I don't have to feel this way. And there are things that I can do to change that. Like, it's really neat. So, and also when you're completely adrenal fatigued, you really don't have the capacity to do that for yourself yet. So that's also one area where I find working with patients really does help, is to get them to the point where they can do that for themselves.
So when somebody comes to you, what would be some of the presenting symptoms? What are they that would lead you to think, this could be adrenal fatigue, or I'll bet this is adrenal fatigue?
Oh my gosh, so many things. The bottom of the barrel. So adrenal fatigue, if you ever read up on it, has multiple stages to it, right? So the breakdown of 3 that I give people is the acute stage. That's where if someone ever comes up behind you and spooks you, and you have that complete burst, and then you sort of sit down for a couple minutes and then you're okay. That's that acute stage. The second stage is the tired but wired stage. So you're tired, but you can't sleep, you can't rest, you got to keep moving, your head hits the pillow, your thoughts going a mile a minute, you're waking up multiple times throughout the night. It's that kind of go, 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 even though all you want to do is just sit still, right? And then the third stage is just complete burnout. Like, it takes you everything to get out of bed in the morning. And we fluctuate throughout these stages because we make these hormones naturally in our body, right? So it's just a matter of if we're spending them faster than we're making them. But so what I'm watching for is, people who are at that really struggling, it takes me everything to get out of the bed in the morning, can't control their emotions. I see that quite often. When they're at that really, really low stage, they can't control their emotions. So I have, big CEO people running companies coming in, sitting, crying in my office going, I don't do this. I run 100 people and, blah, 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 and I can't keep my stuff together right now. Right. That kind of picture, or just the picture of, not managing yourself well, right? Or having that dip in the middle of the day and not being able to come back from that, or getting through your work day, no problem. And then getting home and sitting on the couch and not being able to do anything but just stare at the TV or the wall, or, not wanting to exercise, not wanting to feed yourself properly. Like there's a whole spectrum of where that is. Sleep is a big one. That's a good indicator for me, how they're sleeping, if they fall asleep easily, if they stay asleep, if they wake up feeling rested. That's an early stage one for me, usually, is the sleep dysregulation that happens with people. Mm-hmm. So it's always part of the whole picture, right? How's your thyroid doing? Do you have a thyroid condition happening? Because that usually indicates that things have been building for a long time in the burnout stage. How are your hormonal system, right? Because they're all tied. It's all your hormonal system. So for women, how's your menses? How do you manage that? How's your libido? How's your digestion? Because they all tie together. So, really, it's a lot about understanding where they're at. People quite frequently say, "This is not me. I'm not like this," and everybody's an expert in themselves, right? So when someone says that to me, that gives me a pretty good indication that they're not like this. This is not how they normally are. And then you look at that and go, okay, well, how were you? And when did that change? And how did it change? And then you start to get a pretty good track record of how things shifted. And then what does life look like for you, right? How much are you giving out versus how much are you taking in? Mm-hmm. And it becomes pretty clear. And there's always tests, right?
That's what I was going to ask you, is what lab work would you suggest? For example, if somebody is relating to what you're saying, they're feeling like this, and they would like to take the reins of their health care. Maybe the only person they have is an MD, and maybe somebody who isn't that knowledgeable in this area. What kinds of tests would you say, ask your doctor to do these tests?
Well, if you want to know how your adrenals are doing, you want to do a hormone test. So the ideal test is that you're looking at everything. So you're looking at your hormones. So, for women, and that's who I see more often than not, it's your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. That's the same for men, though. You want to look at your DHEA, and then your cortisol. And so cortisol fluctuates throughout the day. So if you can, you want to do a 4-point cortisol, which is you test your cortisol 4 times throughout the day, rather than just once. Mm-hmm. And then that gives you a pretty good idea of what your cortisol is at. You can also look at your melatonin, because especially if you're having a sleep issue going on, because melatonin is the hormone that our brain releases when it gets dark. It helps us sleep, but cortisol works against melatonin. So if your cortisol is high, or it's spiking in the evening when it's not supposed to, that's going to affect your sleep quality. It's going to affect your melatonin levels as well. So the general one that I do with patients is a urine or saliva, depending on what we're looking at, of a hormone panel. So the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, and then your 4-point cortisol. And, we can go as in depth as looking at all the breakdown of each of those as well. So let's see where along the pathway things are not connecting anymore, or not going well. That would be the, top of the line one that you're looking at.
And you'd probably do thyroid too? T4, T3, TSH?
If there's a thyroid picture, yeah. If there's not a thyroid picture, then no. In the ideal world, you'd test everything.
Yes.
Right? So you have the availability to look at everything and go, okay. In the reality world, you get very specific about what you're looking at. because basically it can get down to cost for patients or availability, right? And so when you look at that, and those are just two very real life things that you have to navigate through. So in the ideal world, I'd look at everything. In the, reality world, if we were talking about hormones, in your adrenal fatigue in particular, then that would be the first one that I'd look at is your cortisol levels, at least just your cortisol levels, right? If you do have a thyroid picture, or you've got a lot of that fatigue going on and things aren't responding, then you would check the thyroid. You'd also check iron too in that case, because those are two areas that if they're not working, if your iron's low or your thyroid's not working, no matter what you do, they're going to stay tired until you address those issues.
Right.
So, yeah, you've got the pathological things that you check out for. So that's low iron, that's low thyroid function when we're talking about fatigue. Okay. And then you have the rest of it that you look for. Where's your cortisol at? What's your DHEA at? How is your hormone system working right now? Are you balanced? Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, if you find that, let's say the cortisol levels are wonky, what would you have your patients do? What do you recommend?
There's, it depends on what stage they are. So if they're in that primary stage, that first stage, phase one, what the tests usually call it, of adrenal fatigue, then you're looking at just balancing with, vitamins and minerals, because those, cofactors is what we call them in what our body needs to make the hormones. So you're basically feeding the body what it needs to make that hormone. Because when you're in phase one, the thought process is your body still has the ability to do that quite well, and it will. When you hit phase two, that's when you're starting to look at glandulars. So actually adrenal tissue from a different animal and herbs. And stepping it up a little bit more. And then in phase three, you're looking at definitely glandulars. And even in some of the really tough cases, I'll do some pharmaceuticals, like very, very low dose pharmaceuticals. Or we'll do something a bit more intensive like IV therapy, where people aren't necessarily taking things orally. We're giving them to them in their IV, like direct to the source through the bloodstream. So we're not worried about absorption factor. They're getting those full doses. So that just depends on where they're at. Again, what's available for them, what's the reality of their lifestyle and what they can do. And then as much as possible, creating lifestyle stuff that feeds that as well, right? When people are completely burnt out, exercise is good for all of us, but if you're completely burnt out, me telling you to go run a marathon is pretty much useless. So it's, okay, well, what can you do right now? Where are you at and what can we get you doing? And the better you start to feel, the more lifestyle things we can put into place. So you're not dependent upon these other tools, supplements or any external products. You've got the tools already available for you in what you do on your everyday basis.
I know that when I'm feeling really tired and exhausted and somebody asks me if I'm exercising, I practically want to slap them because I'm like, no. And when I first had my thyroid crash, I was doing a really fun, it's called NIA, and a great aerobic exercise, great music, really fun. And I loved it. And then I started feeling crappy afterwards because it was taking too much out of me. And, actually, that was a benefit because I discovered Pilates, which really has benefited me greatly, and I really like Pilates. But I had to do something that wasn't aerobic. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I use that measurement a lot for patients. I'll say, go ahead and go do something. But if you get home and you're completely flat out, you can't get off the couch after you've done your workout. You've pushed yourself too hard. Because that's one of the challenges when we start to feel better, we want to go out and take on the world, and what happens is you're starting to feel better because you're starting to get repleted and your body's starting to heal. But you're still in that fine line where, you can't just go and you get a little bit of gas in the tank and then you decide to drive to wherever, Mexico or something, right? Like, that doesn't work. You're going to run out of gas again. So, there's that fine line, and that's a lot about helping to navigate patients and keep them balanced in that, what's a healthy amount, what's not a healthy amount, and where you go from there. So there's a lot of stuff that's available to us that comes from the earth, or that comes from our food, that we can use, that helps us a lot. So I really try and get people to do that as much as possible first before we go to other things, because that's just my philosophy and where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
That's also what the body recognizes and uses very easily. So I know when we're using food as medicine, as long as your digestive tract is healthy, your body's going to take it all up, and you're not going to react to it in a negative way because you recognize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your body knows what it is. You've had this for however long years you've been eating it or whatever. So if we can do that as much as we can, that's great. And then you just go step by step through where they're at, and I match people where they're at, and we go from there.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned as long as their digestion's okay. I've been reading up about the gut microbiome and gut dysbiosis, and is there a connection and interrelation with adrenal fatigue?
Yeah, huge. And that's something maybe on a different day we can talk about, this idea of SIBO.
Okay.
Later on. That's you and me tidbit, because that's coming out on the forefront now, and it's fascinating when we talk about digestion and microbes. When we're under stress, which is when we're under stress and our body's in the sympathetic nervous system, so the fight or flight mode, a whole cascade of events happens, one of which is our blood flow gets shunted more towards our limbs and our eyes, so we can see better and run faster because our body thinks it's under threat, which means that it shuts down our digestive tract and our reproductive tract for the most part, because when we talk about priorities and survival, it's more important to get away from the threat than it is to eat or reproduce, which is really what those systems are for, right? So people who are living in a chronic state of fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system or stress, whichever term you want to use, they're really limiting the amount of energy that's going towards their digestive tract. And so they can really run into trouble with, if that's a long time standing, their body's not producing the digestive enzymes as well to break down the food. It's not going through the breakdown process as well, so you're not getting the nutrients. It's not absorbing them as well. There's a lot of pieces to the digestive tract that can happen. So usually when you're under stress, and I know certainly for me when I'm under stress, I usually don't feel stress, but I have behavioral things that'll come up. So for me personally, my appetite will disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty big indicator to me. Okay, you're not hungry, something's going on, you're pretty stressed out, right? Because it's not uncommon for you to say, well, what's your stress level? For me to say to people, what's your stress level? And for them to say, 0. You kind of sit back and look at them and go, really? I don't think I've ever met a 0. I'm not like in real life. I don't think I've actually ever met a 0, right? And they start talking about other things, right? Eating habits, bowel function, all of that. And you sort of go, okay, well, that doesn't sound quite balanced to me. So let's talk about it. So for me, I have no appetite. Every exam period, without fail, my appetite would go. I wouldn't want to feed myself. And then after the exam period, I get acid reflux. Guaranteed. Never ever had that problem before, right? But med school exam period. And it was habitual every time. Because that's just what happened for me. So I didn't feel stressed when I was in exam period, but those things would happen in my body. And so that just indicates to you how closely tied our digestive tract is. If you want to experiment with this, when you're stressed or you're scared or you're in that fight or flight mode, check if you have saliva in your mouth. Because saliva is the first indicator for our body to say, hey, we've got food coming, right? We smell good food, we salivate. Well, that's got enzymes in it that help to break down carbohydrates in our mouth. So, see if you can make saliva when you're in that mode, right?
So is what I'm hearing you say that if you have a dry mouth, you may be under stress?
Well, there's a difference between being dehydrated and being stressed.
Right.
So people who have really bad anxiety for example, right? Because anxiety is a part of that fight or flight mode. Our body's going into that stress response. What'll have them do when they're in the middle of that anxiety is make saliva in their mouth, because we're trying to pull them back to that parasympathetic mode, that rest and digest mode, right? It's an experiment to have people do, is just to recognize how closely those two systems are tied together.
Oh, okay.
Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, I'm still trying to understand. So, okay, let's see if I'm hearing you correctly. So, when a person they're anxious about something, and that may cause a dry mouth. And so to have the person, consciously, try to make saliva.
Mm-hmm. So that it's not that it makes a dry mouth,
Okay.
it's that you don't make saliva.
Mm. Okay. And you're not making saliva because you're not digesting. The anxiety is causing your system to take away from your digestion because of the fight flight response.
To go more towards your nervous system. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about priorities, right? Our bodies, we're survival animals, right? So it's about priorities. So it's not, we don't walk around with saliva in our mouth all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we smell a really great meal, we'll have saliva.
Mm-hmm.
If we smell a really great meal when we're in a fight or flight response, that doesn't necessarily happen. So it's one of those things that you can do to just test yourself out, right? It's all circumstantial, because you can have a dry mouth because you're just not drinking enough water and you're dehydrated. That can happen as well. It's just one of those testers that I have people do when they recognize, especially when I see them in a fight or flight response and I watch them and I go, okay, make saliva in your mouth right now. Do you have any saliva in your mouth? And they'll go, no. Can you make some? No. Okay, let's try that. Let's get that happening, right? That's how close those systems are tied together. There's really not any one system in the body that's not tied to another one. It's just how the body works. It's the beauty of the human body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like body awareness. Like for you know what happens in your body when you're stressed. Try to be aware of or pay attention to when you're stressed or anxious. What happens in your body? Do you tense up? Do you get constipated? Does your digestive system do something different as kind of signals to get you to pay attention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call those red flags.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your red flags?
What are your red flags?
So, when someone comes in and they've been in this state for however long, I'll go, okay, and we walk backwards, right? Let's go backwards. And then you start to see the red flags that pop up. What are the indicators? And that's part of my training, right? Is to recognize what those look like. But you start to see them and go, okay, yeah, okay. So this is not, for you, this happened 2 months ago. For me, it sounds like this has been happening in your body for about 2 years, just lesser scale until you start to listen, right? Because it does not feel good. So we're very good at not paying attention when we feel good. You don't realize you feel good until you don't feel good is basically what happens, right?
Well, true. I mean, you can have a pain in your body and it's your focus. Like my shoulder is my thing and it's hurting and I'm always focusing on it. And then one day I'll go, oh, gee, I didn't realize that's not hurting anymore. It's like, I don't even know it.
What's it hurt for? Come on. When's the last time we talked about it? Yeah, that's exactly, I think that's part of it. So
I find that so crazy.
I know. It's really, people are interesting. We're very interesting in that way when you start to learn, and pay attention, right?
Yeah. What came to me was one way to start paying attention and training yourself to notice what your body does. Maybe with journaling, might be something that you might have somebody do, or?
Journaling really helps. Journaling, it depends on the personality. I know for me, people told me for a long time to journal and I just didn't want to. I don't know. There's just something about it. Right. So someone else said, you know what, just go outside and recognize 5 things. I liked being outside. It helped me focus in. 5 things, no problem, right? Didn't take a lot of time. And so I started doing that. And so I just started recognizing things. And it was in the context of, with people who have a lot of trouble with, they don't see the beauty in a lot of things, because there's a lot of beauty in even not feeling good and going through that process and learning things, right? So I'll say, go find 5 things, go outside and find 5 things that are not perfect and appreciate them. So this idea of being perfect, right? Especially if there's a lot of stress in someone's life, this idea, I have to be perfect. Well, there is no such thing. And if there was, life would be very boring. But you have to learn how to appreciate imperfection, right? And so having someone go outside and look at things that are imperfect and finding beauty in them, right? A crack in the wall of your house. Well, still, your house is still standing. That's pretty imperfectly perfect, and so that for me, I like to move. I'm more of a movement person. So that worked better for me. People who like to do art or journal, that works better for them. It's finding what works for people in that way. And sometimes it's baby steps. Now I journal. Now I understand that journaling won't take, half of my life every day to do. It takes 5 minutes, but I had to do something that I found a lot easier that took the same amount of time first. But that's a great way to connect with yourself and do that. Yeah. Journaling, walking, recognizing, just being present, right? With paying attention to what your hand's touching. How does that feel? What does it look like? Those kind of things are it's about really coming back to the now moment, because we spend a lot of time being in our heads or being, ahead of ourselves or behind ourselves or somewhere else. So it's pulling that back.
Especially if you don't feel good, I think it can be a great tendency to not really want to be here and, so a tendency to focus on the past or the future.
Right. Well, I did a talk last night, and it was about sleep and how to improve sleep. And, the idea that when we're you're tossing and turning all night, or you're waking up a lot at night, there's a lot of pathological, physiological reasons that can be happening for that. But if you want to look at it from a more spiritual, mental, emotional perspective, right, you go, okay, body, what the heck's going on? Like, why are you having such a hard time relaxing right now? Right? Or brain. Okay, brain, why are you having such a hard time relaxing? You're obviously trying to communicate with me. It's dark. I'm not doing anything else but laying here. I'm not eating. I'm not driving. I'm not working, whatever. I'm just laying still, and you're not letting me. So what's going on here? And, just giving yourself that time to really not berate it, not get frustrated with it, not judge it, but just say, okay, I'm listening. Go ahead. And, for a lot of people, when this is new for them, I'll say, set a timer, set 2 minutes and go, fine, for 2 minutes, I'm going to listen. And then after that, I'm going to do, whatever you want, or blah, blah, blah. So, and that's the same idea with pain, right? There's a lot of talk about that psychosomatic pain and that idea of where is it coming, where is it actually coming from? If you really want to start to connect with your body, that's how your body's communicating with you at that time for whatever reason. So if you'd like to explore that more, then you do have to sit with it. And so that can feel really overwhelming when you have pain, because pain hurts. So setting a timer is something that is a good idea, because you can do anything for 2 minutes.
That's true. Well, it works for me. It may not work for many people, but what I've found, and it's always hard because it's easy to do, but it's hard for me to get out of bed because all I want to do is friggin' go to sleep. But when I finally go, all right, get up, and I stretch, I go on the floor and I have a little stretching routine that I do. And, almost always I'll just go back to bed and fall asleep. I don't know what it is about stretching, but that seems to work for me.
Right. Well, and it's finding what works for you, right? And that's another big piece, is that, Is there something you can do before you getting to bed that helps that? Or is that just part of where your body's at right now? Or, so that's really, that's what we call very individualized medicine, right? It's finding what works for you, because it's going to be different for everyone. And there's no right, no wrong, no judgment associated with it. It's just what it is.
So try different things and see what works for you.
Yeah. Explore. Right? Play is play sounds a lot more fun. So play with it, right? Like play with what's going on, play with your body, play with your mind, right? Like explore it in that way.
Absolutely. Or sometimes I find just reading, it gets my mind, if it's my mind that's kind of zooming around, if I just read for a while and that it kind of stops the cycle, it breaks it. And then I just, my eyes start drooping and then I just put the book down and fall asleep.
With the sleep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Everybody has their tools, right?
Well, awesome. This has been great. I hope that people get a lot out of this. I think you've given us a lot of great information. Is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I think certainly one of the most important things is if you're not reaching out or, not communicating because you feel embarrassed or judgmental towards feeling this way. And when I say this way, it's really any way. But when we go back to adrenal fatigue, that idea of being tired and not being able to get through your day, or not being able to get through your day as well as you hope that you could, or want to, or believe that you can, or know that you can, you're not alone. And I see this really often with people that I get to see, people who come in over and over again with very similar things going on. And one thing that I do all the time is remind them, like, you're not alone. You're probably not the only person I've even seen today that's going through this. And a lot of us don't realize that. I think with the younger generations, we're starting to get better at communicating that kind of stuff and seeing it more as an opportunity rather than a embarrassment, especially the older generations. I think that idea of asking for help and acknowledging weakness, or what's perceived to be weakness is something that was ingrained, I think, a little bit more. And so I find it really empowering when you start to express what's going on with you, and you would be surprised at how many people go, oh my gosh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Or yeah, I've been there and here's what I tried, or, and it can be a complete stranger and then they become your best friend because they understand what they're talking about. They understand what you're talking about. And so it's really important that if you're feeling not at your best, to explore that, with people, and to express that and to own it. And, there's a difference between acknowledging it versus letting it run your life. Right. But it's really important because I do believe that we all have the opportunity to live our best lives, and whatever that looks like for you, right? And so if there is something that's inhibiting that, and adrenal fatigue is a really big one for a lot of people, it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. So don't be shy about that, and let that be an opportunity for you to create some new connections with people, to meet some new people, to learn about things that are available that you didn't know about before, right? Whether it be a certain type of medicine or a book, or, a new practice like a yoga or a meditation or stretching, or, whatever that is, right? Whole lot all at once. Like, it doesn't have to be just any one thing. But I think that that's really important to recognize and to embrace how empowering it is for you to share your story with other people, because you might be the doorway that lets them open up. And that's a gift. That's a
Absolutely.
gift.
I can personally attest to that. I have met so many people who somehow we get on the subject of thyroid and adrenal issues. And, I do my best to share anything that I can to help that person, direct them into getting some better help and giving them some support and something positive to hold on to, that they don't have to feel like crap for the rest of their lives, that they can get help and there is help, and maybe they just haven't found it yet.
Yeah, and don't give up hope in that way. It's really important that you do recognize who you're getting help from and what their training is and what they do and what they know what they do, and that you feel comfortable with them, right? Like, and that you'll trust them, because if you don't, that there are other people who have that training that you can feel comfortable with, because that's really important too. And I encourage people to do that piece as well. But I had a really great lesson that I had was my naturopath when I was in school. She was saying, well, have you asked for help? And I'm like, no, of course not. Like, why would I do that? Right. I wasn't raised to ask for help. I was raised to figure it out. So, and she said, well, you know how you feel when you help someone? I said, yeah. And she's like, feels pretty good. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, when you don't ask for help, you're preventing that person from feeling that way, and that was really humbling for me to recognize, like, oh, I'm stopping someone from feeling that because I'm not asking for help when I really need it. So when you look at it from that way, you're like, well, actually, I'm doing you a huge favor by telling you all of my problems and letting you help me work through them. Like, completely changes the spin on things in that way. But that was really helpful. And so, yeah, and just really, your body is your machine through this life, and it deserves to be taken care of and to be respected. And people, we tend to spend a lot more time and energy and finances on our cars and maintaining them than we do on our bodies. And we forget that, your car really won't matter if your body's not working.
Actually, I find nothing really matters very much if you're not feeling well. It doesn't make any difference what you have or don't have. If you're not feeling well, it just pulls everything down. And, one of the things I'd like to say to people is that if you're seeing a healthcare practitioner of some sort and you're not getting the help you need, don't be afraid to find someone else, because not every healthcare practitioner is interested in the same things or specializes in the same things or has a background that, or knowledge that may help what particular thing is going on with you. And to look around, ask questions, call different practitioners and let them know what's going on with you, and ask them, how would you approach this? What would you do? Find somebody who can take a different approach than what you're getting now.
Yeah, it's really important. That's really important. And really empowering. And you know what? It's sometimes it's a matter of, I have patients where I go, okay, this is as far as we can get together right now. You need to go see this person to deal with this piece, and they're better equipped to do it, to guide you through that than I am. And then when that piece is done, come on back and we'll deal with this piece, and so that's not personal. That's just doing best medicine, really. And care for someone is recognizing that. And we all have the right for that, right? So I think that that's just important to really empower yourself with that knowledge that you get to choose. And some people you work really well with, some people you don't. And that's just what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just what it is. So I think that that's a really important piece for everybody to recognize and to feel comfortable with and to have trust with, because we have to have a foundation of trust with everyone.
Right.
Yeah. And authenticity.
Right. And there's no reason to not feel good. If you find someone who can help you feel good, maybe it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. Like you were saying, if you feel like you've taken them as far as you can right now and they need to do something else and then come back, or whatever the scenario might be. I love it when I'm working with people who are willing to work with other healthcare practitioners and, it's a team and work together, because not everyone has the whole answer.
Oh, yeah. Janine, if you knew how many practitioners I have for me, like across the board, right? And and they each serve a very wonderful purpose in my life. And I respect them all and appreciate them all and utilize them all. Right. And there's just times in life when you need that and times in life when you don't. But, I'm very, very proactive about creating my healthcare team and having a healthcare team that's available to me, even when I'm healthy, because when I'm not healthy, I want to know that they're going to be there for me. So creating those relationships and, becoming a patient to them and doing all that, that's really important. So, I have some people are like, oh, well, I'm just, embarrassed, or why I have this practitioner. Is it okay that I'm seeing them? And I'm like, are you kidding? That's amazing. Yes. Build your team. It's about a team approach, and how can the team help you? Right. So I have a team, and I support anybody else getting their own team. Right.
I think that's awesome advice. And, don't wait until you don't feel good to have someone that you trust. I think it's important to develop a relationship with at least one healthcare practitioner, so that when something does happen, you've already got a relationship built, and they know you, they know who you are, and they can do such a much better job of helping you. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Diana Draper.
Well, thanks, Janine. It's good to have you.
Thank you. And we will talk again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Have a great week. Well, what is it? Tuesday? Have a great week. Yeah, okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Draper. That was very informative. I learned a lot. I hope our listeners did too. If you want to learn more about Dr. Draper and her services, go to drdianadraper.com. Diana, Diana, Draper, Draper.com. That's her website. And thank you so much, Diana. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. I know you're a busy gal. And take care, all. Be well.
That brings us to the end of our show. I hope you found something of value that you can use in your life. Thanks for listening. The Keeping It Real with Janine podcast comes out every 2 weeks. Questions, comments, or podcast topic ideas? We'd love to hear from you. Email at realjanine@gmail.com or Twitter @realjanine. Remember to spell Janine correctly, Janean. Check out the show notes, extras, and bonus recipes at our blog, realjanine.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Be well.